Mario Kart Wii is now almost 2 decades old, and in that time, your memories of the game can often warp and change into things that may have never even existed at all. In this video, we'll take a look at and explain online entries of how people have come to misremember this game in some surprisingly strange ways. With that said, let's get straight into the false memories of Mario Kart Wii. Toad's Turnpike. We start off with an online user who shared a story of them arguing with their brother over whether Toad's Turnpike from Mario Kart 64 was in Mario Kart Wii as a retro track. Their brother insisted it had never been in the game, so fully confident they were right, they decided to prove it. They turned on their Wii, loaded up Mario Kart Wii, and checked for themselves, only to realize their brother was correct. Toad's Turnpike was nowhere to be found in the game and never has been. What makes this even stranger is how clearly they remember it being there. They describe vivid memories of playing the track specifically in Mario Kart Wii, not on the original Nintendo 64, having never owned that console. There are a few possible explanations for this false memory. The first is that they may have actually played Toad's Turnpike, but in Mario Kart 8 where it was later reintroduced. The user does admit they played Mario Kart 8, but they say that it wasn't their first time seeing the track. In fact, they recall being pretty disappointed by the anti-gravity walls, feeling like it ruined the fun of dodging the traffic of the highway that they originally experienced in playing the track on the Wii. Another possibility is confusion with Toad's Factory. However, this doesn't fully add up either, since they specifically remember the track being a highway, not a factory setting. That leaves the most likely explanation being that they are simply mixing up with Moonview Highway, the closest equivalent to a track that is actually in Mario Kart Wii. The layout and traffic-heavy design could definitely blend in with their memories of Toad's Turnpike, but even that theory has complications, with the user stating they never even unlocked the Special Cup, meaning they technically couldn't have had access to Moonview Highway at all. They also claim they never installed mods or altered the game in any way to play the track that way. Even other people agree too that they also remember Toad's Turnpike, but the truth is, it was never in Mario Kart Wii, leaving much ambiguity as to how players clearly remember a track that never existed. GCN Mario Circuit. GCN Mario Circuit is arguably one of the most forgettable tracks in Mario Kart Wii. There are countless instances online of players replaying the game after a long break and genuinely forgetting that the course existed, being very surprised to see it on the track list. A big reason for this comes down to how unremarkable the track feels. The race itself is often described as bland or quite boring, lacking a unique identity or standout gimmick that most other tracks in the game have. On top of that, Mario Kart Wii already includes multiple more exciting Mario-themed courses, so it makes sense how GCN Mario Circuit could get lost in people's memories. All of this makes the track pretty unmemorable in the grand scheme of things, and it probably won't change as time goes on and the course fades from more people's minds. Delfino Pier Chimneys. On the battle course Delfino Pier, several chimneys can be spotted around the map, some with item boxes above them that players are meant to grab through boost ramps. However, one player recalls another feature about these chimneys. They distinctly remember falling through one of these chimneys and somehow ending up inside the building's interior. The memory feels very clear to them, but despite repeated attempts, they've never been able to recreate it in-game. And in reality, there's no documented way for this to even happen on Delfino Pier. The chimneys themselves are designed with vents and solid collision to prevent players from dropping through them, with the only actual ways to get inside of the building being the lower entrances and the upper exits. A likely explanation is that the player may have accidentally fell through one of the openings above and misinterpreted the situation to be them falling through one of the chimneys, which would make some sense, especially considering the chaotic battle match going on around them, where movement can feel a bit disorienting. Another possibility, not just with this entry but with many false memories, is that this recollection comes from a childhood dream, as it is often the case that young minds fixated on exciting video games can blend imagination with real gameplay. Either way, this appears to be another case of a strongly remembered moment that doesn't quite match up to what's possible in-game. Mario Kart Wii in the 1990s. This entry comes from an online post where a user claims to remember a Mario racing game from the 1990s called Mario Cross on the Nintendo 64. According to them, the game featured Mario characters riding motorcycles instead of carts. That detail immediately brings Mario Kart Wii to mind, since it was the first and earliest title in the series to introduce bikes to the game. On top of that, the name Mario Cross is also strikingly similar to Mario Kart Wii's early developmental name, Mario Kart X, and it's quite clear through a quick online search that Mario Cross doesn't exist at all. Still, what makes the post unusual is just how confident the memory is. The original user insists they played it as a child, and in the comments, others also claim to remember it. One user even says they own a Mario motorcycle pin dated 1989 from the game, which adds another layer of confusion to the discussion. So how do multiple people end up with such a similar memory of something that is non-existent? Well, one possibility is that people are unintentionally merging memories of different games. In that case, Mario Kart Wii becomes a close match, especially with the introduction of bikes, but it still doesn't fully line up. The timing is off by at least a decade. And Mario Kart Wii also includes karts and other mechanics that don't match the description given in the post. It also doesn't explain the claim about a 1989 motorcycle pin, which predates both the Wii and the Nintendo 64, and itself could be a myth, as through my research I could only find similar pins without any mention of Mario Cross. Another possible explanation is the Mario-themed version of the game Excitebike, known as Bun Bun Mario Battle Stadium, a Japanese exclusive variant of the original Nintendo 64 Excitebike game released in 1997. This would definitely match up, as this niche version of Excitebike had Mario characters racing on motorcycles, just as the user said to have remembered, and matches the given time period. The only problem is the original user completely denies this game being what they played, having remembered something completely different. But despite multiple people insisting they clearly remember Mario Cross, there's just no record of the game existing anywhere. And while Mario Kart Wii and the Mario-themed Excitebike are pretty believable ways people could have remembered what they think is Mario Cross, none of these solutions seem to satisfy those who consistently claim that they clearly remember something else. Lakitu's Intervention. In Mario Kart Wii, Lakitu acts as a helpful guide during races, signaling players to start and rescuing them when they fall off the course or go out of bounds, placing them right back on the track. However, at least one player recalls something different from their earliest experiences with the game. They strongly remember Lakitu going a step further, and actually picking their character up when they simply drove backwards for too long. However, when they returned to the game years later, they realized this wasn't the case at all. In reality, going backwards only triggers Lakitu to signal the player to turn around, while full recovery only happens when you go out of bounds or fall off the track as previously stated. One possible explanation for this is that the memory may have come from a situation where the player drove backwards into an area that looked drivable but was actually out of bounds, such as the deep sand in tracks like DS Desert Hills. As from a beginner's perspective, it could easily feel like Lakitu intervened just for reversing, when in reality, the game was registering an off-track situation. This would be the most logical explanation, since in Mario Kart Wii, Lakitu of course only physically picks up racers when they go out of bounds, and generally allows players much more freedom unlike later installments to the franchise. But besides that, there isn't much reasoning to explain this false memory. Baby Boo. King Boo was brought back to Mario Kart Wii from Mario Kart Double Dash to the excitement of many players. However, one person also recalls something similar, a character they clearly remember called Baby Boo. They describe Baby Boo as a baby variant of King Boo, being in the middleweight class. According to their memory, they only ever encountered this character while playing the game at friends' houses during their childhood, as they never owned a Wii themselves. This memory is quite unusual, as unlike other characters, there simply is no baby variant of King Boo in Mario Kart Wii, or in any other Mario Kart title for that matter. There's also no known cut character matching this description, and it seems unlikely that childhood friends would have modded their Wii and created a custom Boo baby character like the user describes. Beyond that, there aren't many clear explanations for this memory. One possible connection is the Boo item, which appeared in several early Mario Kart installments, but this is a pretty faulty theory, as that is obviously an in-game item, not a playable middleweight character. Because of that, the mystery of the so-called Baby Boo character is still up in the air, and still largely unexplained. Bullet in first place. This entry comes from another story an online user shared, where they distinctly remember an early memory of playing Mario Kart Wii with their brother and father. In the memory, the father is dominating the race, far ahead of both of his children and the rest of the CPUs. Then, while cruising along in first place, Their father gets an item box and allegedly receives the bullet bill, an item only meant to be possible to get in the lowest of placements. This directly contradicts the game's item distribution system, as in Mario Kart Wii, bullet bills simply are not possible to get in first place. In fact, the highest position you can even get one in is 8th, making the remembered scenario completely impossible within standard gameplay rules. The most straightforward explanation would be that their father obtained the bullet bill in a lower position and then took the item up to first. However, the user is quite adamant that their dad was already well ahead of the competition when he got the item box. Another possibility is that a brief moment of lag misread his position, causing the game to treat him as being in a lower placement than he actually was. But in local CPU races, such an instance is pretty much unheard of, and this clearly wasn't an online match. This next possible explanation is a long shot, but it would make sense. Their father could have actually modded their Wii and perhaps put in the possibility for first place to get bullet bills directly into the game's code, intending to play a harmless joke on his kids and perhaps create a memorable moment. However, this would require a technical understanding of how to make modifications to the Wii, something that not many people know how to do. But again, it is certainly possible. Other than a once-in-a-lifetime game error, there's simply no other theories to how their father pulled off such a crazy feat. But regardless of what actually happened, the memory still serves as a great story to tell. Mario Kart Black. Mario Kart Black is already a well-known creepypasta and mod in the Mario Kart Wii community. It's usually described as a darker version of the game with unsettling visuals, an eerie atmosphere, and other dark changes that make it feel much more like a horror game than a racing game. And importantly, like many of the entries on this list, it isn't real as far as we know. It's just something made up and expanded on by the community, not an actual licensed Mario Kart game on the Wii. But despite that, some people claim they really found this game, and purely by accident. One story describes a user remembering the time they were a kid and found a random storage device from a thrift store filled with numerous normal games you'd expect to see on the Wii. However, hidden among them was a game called Mario Kart Black, with its logo featuring a dark Mario-shaped skull with no eyes smoking a cigarette, something that very much scared the player as a young child. When they finally worked up the courage to play the game, everything was completely off. There was no music, no CPUs, just the racetrack and the complete silence of driving alone. Frightened, they shut it off almost immediately, and not long after, the storage device broke, leaving them only with an unsettling memory of this so-called Mario Kart Black. And it's not just one person. There are multiple posts, multiple comments, all claiming something similar. But here's the reality. A version of Mario Kart Wii with no music, no racers, and glitched visuals isn't impossible at all. But it would have realistically had to have been some modded file of the game someone left on the storage device and gave away to the thrift shop that this individual would find. But even this is hard to believe, especially with not just this instance, but the multiple online posts claiming to have played a real Mario Kart Black game, all feeling purely constructed to gain attention with dramatized and honestly quite unbelievable details. And when people seem to all have their own version of their own story, and a known mod and creepypasta already exists, it heavily suggests players could just be making up stories for the thrill of it, trying to add on to the creepypasta itself. Regardless, it is still possible that a real case happened, but without any proof, we can only be left with questions and doubts about the infamous Mario Kart Black. I hope you all enjoyed, and please let me know if you share any of these false memories, or have any of your own in the comments below. Thanks for watching, I'll see you all around.